Welcome to Raymond Castile's Basement of Horror. We have an amazing show for you today. I have three fantastic guests, and we're going to discuss the history of a company that's very near and dear to many of the people watching right now. It's Imagineering, the company that gave us vampire teeth and vampire blood and the face makeup kits. A company that was very important to the childhood of many of you out there, including to me. Our fantastic guests begin with Barry Koper. He's a two-time Emmy Award winning makeup artist and a collector of Disney Park memorabilia. Barry has been creating makeup since he was 19 years old. He applied the makeup to Tim Allen in all three of the Santa Claus movies, and he was the head of the CBS Studios makeup department for 8 years. Welcome, Barry Koper. Next, we have Gino Acevedo, the creative art director at Wētā Effects in New Zealand. Gino worked in the Los Angeles film industry for 15 years before moving to New Zealand 27 years ago to work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And he's been there ever since, creating wonderful characters and monsters for Wētā. And finally, last but not least, we have the legendary Mr. Lawrence J. Liff, Larry Liff, the founder of Imagineering. This is the man, the founder of Imagineering right here, Larry Liff. He started creating makeup at 9 years old, and he finished at 75 years old. And in between, he had many adventures, which we'll talk about. So thank you, all three of you, for being here today. This is very exciting. We're going to tell the story of Imagineering, the Imagineering makeup company. So let's start off with Mr. Liff. Larry, tell me a little bit about your life before starting Imagineering. Lead us up to how did Imagineering come to be?
All right. My dad died when I was 9. I had terminal asthma. And my mother sent me to an institution in Denver, Colorado that took only kids who were terminal with asthma. And they saved 98% of them. I was part of that 98%. I had to find a project. That was one of the requirements of being when I was 9 years old there. And in the cellar, their basement, I found the old Jerry Mahoney ventriloquist dummy. So that was my thing. And I was hooked up with two people. They would remind you of Gideon and Longfellow and Pinocchio, who were Stein makeup representatives for the Southwest. And over a 3-year period working with them, mostly doing ventriloquism, but also assisting them, they taught me everything they knew about makeup, or everything that I could absorb.
Tell me what Stein is. What's Stein makeup?
Stein makeup was actually the predecessor to Max Factor. They were the first real theatrical makeup company out there. Non-existent now, I believe, but that was it. So if you wanted to be if you were doing shows or movies or whatever, TV, whatever you were doing, chances are that's who you were initially buying makeup for. So the industry moved on, and they ultimately sold themselves a couple of times and then died on the vine. But they were prominent then. So Longfellow and Gideon taught me everything they knew about makeup. And when I came home, I decided I wanted to run away from home and become a famous makeup artist. So I was 13, I ran away from home to LA, walked on to some studio out there where they were doing something that required a lot of body paint. and asked if they needed some help, and everybody laughed at me. But ultimately, they gave me an airbrush, and I discovered I could do body makeup. And I got a full-time job. They weren't paying much attention to Social Security then. So I didn't have a card. Nobody who was writing paychecks had any idea I was 13 years old. I had an apartment, and I got homesick. So somewhere in there, around 13 and a half, my grandmother lived in Venice. I went to Venice to visit her. She called the police. Police took me back to Phoenix, and I never ran away from again. But I made a lot of connections while I was in LA with makeup people. And the makeup guy in Phoenix was a guy named C.J. Smith. He was an accountant, and he sold science makeup in the Southwest. And he got me a lot of little jobs from movies that were coming into Phoenix and being made there. And so that's how I started. And then I moved from there, which is another story, to Playboy Club, and then ultimately into Imagineering. So I'll stop there, Ray.
Okay, so Barry and Gino, feel free to commandeer the program because you know Larry very well. So if you want to ask him a question or back up something he's saying, just jump right in, because I know you enter the story a little bit later. I want to get Larry into like the creation of the teeth and the blood first, but please feel free to interject as you see fit.
Yeah, and one thing with that, Larry, is like, didn't you say that one time that you did some makeup for The Outer Limits?
When I was in Chicago, and that's part of the continuation of the story, yes, I did some work for a couple of The Outer Limits when I was being filmed there many, many years ago.
That's great.
I wasn't part of the union. I wasn't part of the unions because I did a lot of work that does not have my name on it because I never been in the union. So they kind of had to sneak me in the back door.
The business was very strict back then. Like if you were in the union, you really couldn't.
It couldn't work.
Yeah, you couldn't work.
It was tough. The unions were very, very strict, and you had to be. There's a whole apprenticeship program and everything, and it was quite involved. But Larry, I'm curious to ask a question about what was your connection with Playboy?
All right. So now that I'm back in Phoenix, connected with C.J. Smith, and doing some helping with him with some movie contracts he had, Playboy Club opened a club in Phoenix. And they were looking for a makeup artist. So I applied for the job, and I got it. I was 19 years old at the time. I was the only guy who had a key to the bunny's elevator. Went right up to their floor. And I did makeup for them for a couple of years. Like I said, I was 19, and one day I was sitting in the lounge there having a drink, Coca-Cola, because I couldn't drink anything else yet. Was a VP from Playboy Club, and he asked me what he thought of the makeup program there and what I guess thought differently. And I was a big mouth kid and told him I thought he had a really rotten program. That it was very splintered. Everywhere there was a Playboy Club, there was a makeup artist, and he developed his own thing. There was no unity. And he had 2 or 3 makeups that were standard, party makeup, or this makeup, or that makeup. So I said, what you really need is somebody to put this together for you and unify everything. And about 3 weeks later, my phone rang, and it was the guy, and he said to him, well, why can Chicago do this for us? And that's how I got involved with Playboy. A little side story to that is that, and because it ties into The Outer Limits also, is that I was my brain is beginning to fleet. I wanted to be a director, a theater director. And I went and I applied to the Goodman Memorial Theater wing of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I'd already had a bunch of classes that wouldn't let me come in as a junior. So I didn't go. But now I was going to Playboy Club. So I called my contact at Goodman, a friend of mine who was head of makeup there. And I said, hey, look, I'm going to be there. If there's anything, comes up that we could work together, whatever. And he said to me, look, there are a couple of classes we're teaching in makeup here. And if you'd like to help out and do one of those classes, I'll see that you get in here as a junior. So I went to school at Goodman. I taught a class there, and I worked for a Playboy club all at the same time over a 2-year period. That's how it pieced together, Barry.
That's fantastic. This is something I had never heard of. And Chicago, I believe, back then was the head of the Playboy organization.
Yeah, it was. I worked right in the mansion, and it was a crazy place. I never, ever met Hugh Hefner.
You never met Hugh Hefner working in the mansion?
No, I never met him. But every Friday night, they had a wild party at the mansion, and they hired a football team. They brought in a whole football team to host it. And they had a bar in the basement of this place, and the whole back of the bar was a fish tank. And you could get down there by sliding down a fireman's pool. So all night long, these football players would run up the stairs and slide down the pool, and run up the stairs and slide down the pool.
Wow. I'm envious. I am envious of you. Boy, that is a dream job for a lot of young men.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I'm sorry that you didn't meet Hugh Hefner, because if you had, I would have asked. I know he was a big fan of horror, classic horror, and monsters. And I would have wondered, was he talking about that, or was that part of his persona back then? Because he kind of started to make it part of his persona, like in the 90s. He did a lot of funded restoration of classic horror movies and had a lot of horror decor in the mansion, stuff like that. So to get us to Phoenix, so you're in Chicago now, get us back to Phoenix, because that's where the birth of Imagineering is, in Phoenix, right? Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes.
So
how did that happen, huh?
Yes.
Okay, so now I got to go back to Playboy Club and doing some work for makeup in Chicago. I was always very conscious of people who worked with me and for me, saying that they were treated fair, they were not mistreated. It would bother me a great deal if they were. I was doing a shoot somewhere in Chicago that involved the swimming pool. And there was a guy there who was coming on to one of my makeup girls, and she wasn't liking it. And I had a hot temper then. Very mild now, but very hot then. And I went over and pushed the guy in the swimming pool. And happened to be the son of the producer, and I got fired. Came home to Phoenix with no job. I had not finished the degree, and I decided to finish my teaching degree at Arizona State University, which I did. I taught high school for 3 years. And during that 3-year period, I had a friend his name was Bert Ride, and he was a radio announcer in Phoenix. And he was a salesman. And I said to him, look, I'll put a monster makeup kit together if you'll sell it. And he said, you're on.
Why did you want to do that?
Well, I just had a background in all that stuff. I just thought to myself, it's a way to make some extra money. Teachers did, my first year's salary, I made $5,600. Of course, this is way back in the late 60s, but nevertheless, it was pretty hard to live on that. So I thought, okay, this guy, I can put some makeup together, and I did. I put a kit together. And the kit, one of the things, it was a few tubes of liquid makeup and a pair of evil teeth. That was the whole kit.
All right, so where did the evil teeth come from?
I really sculpted the first ones and put them together. As a matter of fact, to give me a second. I don't know where it is. It's here. So
you sculpted those teeth by hand.
Yeah. Yeah, and they have a chip in it.
Yes.
And if it doesn't have a chip in it, they're a knockoff. They're not mine. But in any case, well, I had to have a mold made of that. By the time I got the kit together, I had every penny I had into that project. The kit didn't sell. And Birch had put it all out on a guaranteed sale basis, so it all came back to me. And I had to figure out how to pay these people who bought it and so forth and so on. But the one thing I noticed is when the kits came back, the teeth had been ripped out of all of them, for 95% of them. So I said, well, maybe the teeth are an item. So the following year, I put out teeth all by themselves. Didn't cost me a lot. I already had the molds. I just put them in a box at either 19 cents or 25 or 29 cents each. I can't remember which one where it started. And bingo, it hit. That was the beginning of Imagineering.
Where were the teeth produced at, Larry?
Here in Phoenix.
Oh, they were. Okay.
Yeah, there was a plastic. There was a company here called Space Plastics, and they had injection. They were a little injection mold company, and they built the first tool for me and made the first teeth for me, and made them all for many years.
Now we got a cast of one of those molds, Barry, that you'd given us.
Yes, right. And I've got the original here in this mess of a desk somewhere.
Yeah, thankfully, Larry he trusted me. You remember we had that makeup artist drive it all the way out, drive the mold out, just so we could cast it. And thank you again, Larry, for so much for letting me do that for everyone. I think it's a great piece that I know I have on display, and I'm sure Gino does, and everyone else.
Actually, Barry, I think I threatened you I threatened death if you lost that mold.
Yeah, you probably did. Yeah. I mean, that is a amazing thing, and it's just, we'll get in, we'll talk about maybe that whole Monsterpalooza thing and everything, and how that all came together. But I'm just loving hearing your story right now, because it echoes so much of what I said to you when I came to work for you.
That picture you just product you just held up.
Yeah, so this is not the original evil teeth, but just so people know what we're talking about.
The original, well, that probably, if it has a nick in it, it probably is the original mold.
Well, it's Imagineering, but I mean, it's not the original issue. I have the original issue. This is what I could grab quickly.
The original issue was just thrown into a poly bag, into a box with nothing. FDA came along and said you can't do that because people are putting it in their mouths and then selling it back in the box.
Oh.
So they made me develop packaging, and the first packaging was a poly bag, period, with the teeth on it. And I have one of those, and I paid $125 to get one on email so that I could have it in my collection.
I've got to find this. Is
that like with a header card with the bag below?
No, there never was a version of that with a header. It was just a printed poly bag.
Oh.
The artwork was horrid. It was.
We got
but
this.
So.
Oh, turn that around. Let me see what that looks like in front. Oh, yeah.
This one says 1981.
Hold it up, Gino. Let's see.
Yeah, Vampire Blood came along 4 or 5 years later.
Larry, did you cast the vampire teeth ever glow in the dark?
Yeah, I did. That's how again, a lot of it was just the motivation of money. We were looking to grow the evil teeth and push them as far as they could, so we put glow in them. And then started all over again. There you are. That's the original.
Oh my God.
There we go. I'm sorry for all the interruption, but I thought we had to see that.
Yeah.
I gotta find my bag of that. I have one of those that I bought on eBay. I'll have to get you to autograph that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the kit, the original kit, it had the original kit.
You don't have it because it didn't come out under Imagineering.
Right. So what else was in it? It had teeth and what else?
It had teeth and 3 little tubes of makeup.
Oh, so it didn't have the blood.
No, blood didn't come around for another 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so the original kit didn't say Imagineering. So when did that name come into being? What was the first product that had the Imagineering name? Was it
probably Evil Teeth?
Yeah.
Yeah, except not in that package. The first product was in the package that you initially held up, which was I forget what the process is called, but you suck it. You put the product between plastic and a board, and you suck the plastic to the board. It's vacuum forming. Yeah. That was, and we didn't have a vacuum former, so we formed it out. But that thing you're holding it, Gino, was many years after
blister packing.
What?
Blister packaging.
Yeah. Blister pack. No, that's not a blister pack.
Oh, that's not?
A blister pack is an actual blister that's sealed to a card. I think that's vacuum formed.
Yeah, the blisters, the heat sealed onto the card.
Gotcha.
Anyway, that led to vampire blood. And once we had that evil teeth out there, we had it out in a bunch of places, but most of the stores didn't want to buy just one product, and we needed to expand it. And
what kind of stores sold that evil teeth, that bag? What kind of store would that have sold at?
7-Eleven, Circle K's, a lot of convenience stores. There were not Kmart. Kmart was the biggest one out there at that time. But I think...
did you have them at like mom and pop costume shops?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure we did, but what we did is we got sales reps. We had no sales organization at all, so we just hired sales reps, and they went and they put all this out. It was just evil teeth, and they were thirsting for something else. And blood seemed to be simple because, if it was just plain blood, you were making it, you made it with Tiro syrup and red dye. That was it. So we took that and put it not in a tube, but in a bottle with a squeeze top, like a squeeze bottle like a mustard bottle, but very, very small. And we just filled it into those bottles by hand. It was Tiro syrup and food coloring. And we said you could eat it. That led us into a major recall with the Food and Drug Administration. There's a bunch of kids up in Washington State and got sick and were taken to the hospital. And the only through line they could find was that only vampire blood. So FDA came along and closed it down. Recalled all the blood out there. There were headlines in major newspapers across the country saying even vampires get sick. But what happened in the end is we stayed with the telephone. We didn't give up our business. We redid the formula using a little company in LA who filled tubes and who altered the formula. And we told our customers, no, we won't give you your money back, but we will replace your product. And that's what we did. We replaced our product. And with these headlines, while we thought it would put us out of business, we had companies calling us from all over the United States. We've been trying to find you for 2 years. Tripled our business, this recall. And by then we were making vampire blood. Somebody else was making it for us. We were subcontracting it. It was in a tube. And that's when the vampire kit came along, Barry.
Well, I have a question for you that I have to ask because I'm a big Disney buff, and that is when you created the title Imagineering, Disney had their Imagineering company, and so was there any sort of conflict there or anything?
Yeah, Disney is actually this interesting story all the way around, because we got thrown out of this. Our product got thrown out of Disney, but I'll leave that from now on. I'll leave that story for a moment. We were way before Disney using Imagineering.
The title.
They actually flew me into LA and had a group of attorneys work me up, beat the hell out of me emotionally for 4 or 5 hours, telling me what they were going to do to me. But I was a pretty hard head, and I wasn't going to give up the logo. And ultimately,
what year would this have been?
What?
Approximately what year would this have been?
But I would probably have been in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. Yeah. It just came along in 65. That's when everything started.
Early.
So, yeah, I graduated in 61. It was 2 or 3 years later. Well, I went to Chicago, did all of the other crap, and came back. So, when we sued them, all these nasty attorneys become the nicest guys that you ever talked to in your life. Called me on the phone, apologizing. Could they please have permission to use the logo? So we actually gave Disney permission to use Imagineering. So I was too stupid to charge them for it, but we've got paid. I have paperwork somewhere where we actually licensed them the right to use Imagineering.
Wow. I would love to see that if you ever find it.
Yeah. I probably got it somewhere. But so...
Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but did that ever flip around again, and where they tried to stop you in years later from using Imagineering?
Never. That when I sold the company, our rights to that logo transferred.
And did you come up with the name, Larry?
This was in the early years of licensing. For example, we licensed, Imagineering licensed the use of the word vampire in a toy item. They wouldn't do that today, but at that time we had a number of fights. Topstone was one of it. The came in and tried to knock off vampire blood. I call it vampire blood. And not only wouldn't we let it call vampire blood, we wouldn't let them use the word vampire in the advertisement of it, period. But
wow.
You couldn't do that these days. That wouldn't happen these days.
Yeah, so I would think, Larry, the only copyrightable word would be Dracula blood, because that's owned by Universal. Where vampire, isn't the word vampire a generic word?
That's what they claimed when we lost it. When we lost right to the use of it, that's what the claim was, that it might have been Topstone. But Barry, we also trademarked the word monster.
Huh.
Wow.
For use in makeup kits, not for anything.
Oh, okay.
So, and we lost
Monster
that.
Cable, trademarking that name for a Monster energy drink. Well, Larry, what's in Vampire Blood? You were saying Caro syrup a while ago, but that was the early one. I think the one that most people are familiar with has it's a very unique smell, a very unique, if they got in their mouth, taste. It was a unique sensation. So what's actually in the classic vampire blood?
After the Kira incident, we had it reformulated. The main ingredient in there is what we call methacel. So it's a methacellulose base, which works very, very well for us. And to that, we added some preservatives so it wouldn't support things like Pseudomonas and bacteria that were allowed. And we stopped advertising it for use in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we could have left it that way. We took the saccharin out of it because we just figured out we were just making trouble for ourselves, saying we didn't want to be classified as a food product. So we had methacellulose with some red food dye in it, and a few preservatives. That's what the formula was.
And so the next sort of the foundational products of Imagineering would be the vampire blood, the evil teeth, and then you had creepy skin and scar stuff.
Yeah, that was the next one.
So take us through that. What was the next major product you introduced?
Well, we had this vampire blood followed by the vampire kit. We only had 2 items, so basically that was it. And we wanted to expand and do more. We really weren't into makeup tours yet, but the door was open there because FDA had shut down all Halloween companies that were doing makeup. No Halloween company was selling makeup. Upstone wasn't, Ben Cooper wasn't, Collegeville wasn't, none of them were. So we came up with a formula for makeup color. We weren't afraid of that, and we put it out along with Star Stuff. And once we had Star Stuff and fake blood and colorant that you could use on your face, once we had that, we could get into all kinds of kits using combinations of those things. And that's exactly what we did. And then I believe we figured at that time close to 89% of the marketplace because nobody else was making it. 3 years later, everybody else started to get back into it, and then it was, in the end, those were the 3 basic products afterwards. And
so what's in Scar Stuff? What's it made of?
Beeswax, paraffin, the combination that allows it to be flexible and kind of blend into your skin at the edges of it. But it was all, it almost had horrible makeup for the day because it was all paraffin based, whether it was makeup, whether it was Star Stuff, whatever it was. So, it would get on your clothes. I mean, there was no way to dry it. It just made a huge mess. And we sold one hell of a lot of it. My favorite item after Star Stuff was a product called Creepy Skin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was and it still is great.
Yeah.
It still is used. You can put it on, make birds, do all kinds of things with it. And that was designed by a predecessor to Gino, a guy named Gene Smith, who worked at Bert Easley's Fun Shop. And he would come and work at Imagineering 1 day a week, just playing around with makeup, and he came up with Creepy Skin. And,
what's in it?
Again, it's the same. It's a little bit of color so that it blends with almost everybody's skin color, whether they're black, white, or green, doesn't make any difference. The cotton ball saturated with a mixture of paraffin, petroleum jelly, and some liquid dye. That's basically it. There's no preservatives in it because preservatives won't grow in that mix.
And all you have to do is just kind of rub it on your skin, and if you're Caucasian, it blends right in.
Yeah. And you can make really ugly-looking burns. You can make scars, scabs. It was really a great item for an amateur. to use.
Well, you know what the
'Cause you could-
genius, Larry, you want to know what the genius of that product was? Was that you had a skeletal structure in there, the cotton ball created webbing, so it wouldn't fall apart like just mortician's wax.
Mm-hmm. I used to make that stuff when I worked for Larry. I'll get into that later, but I just remember at nighttime I'd go in there and I'd get a big Ziploc bag and I'd fill it with cotton balls and the wax. So I'd have this giant concoction of the stuff, and be able to make a cut off stump and all this stuff. It was great stuff.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I used to love
You
it.
could make a whole stump.
Oh, you know what you could do? You could put it on the tip of your finger, and then take a pencil and put all kinds of holes and mess it up, and it looked like somebody bit off the tip of your finger.
Yeah.
But I used to do that when I was in high school. But I used star wax, and it was way before mortician's wax. Then you used mortician's wax.
Yeah.
That was the product that was out there that you bought, and that's how you made scars and all this stuff. And I don't know whatever the hell happened to it. I think it was a Stein's makeup product.
Yeah, or if you went to back then they had magic shops and makeup shops. Even
Right.
where I lived, we had stuff like that. And if it wasn't mortician's wax, then it was nose putty.
Yeah, nose buddy.
I never knew what to do with that.
Yeah.
I tried. It was
Well,
sticky.
nose buddy was easy. Raymond, nose buddy was really easy to get on, but impossible to get off.
Yeah, so Imagineering was much better for a kid to use. I suppose if you were a professional makeup artist, you could.
I used it professionally. I asked Larry when I was there, I said, could I get a bunch of this? Because I really loved it. And like I said, the fact that it had a skeletal structure of a cotton ball in there, and it didn't crack like mortician's wax, and it took, it took blood, okay, and you, like Larry said, you could do anything with it. And I know, Gino, I remember you, I was laughing when you said the big Ziploc bag, because I could just see you making a whole big stump with the stuff. And it was great because it stayed on, and it flexed. It flexed with the skin, where basically mortician's wax is made for a dead body, that doesn't move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Larry, now you've got the teeth, the blood, creepy skin, and scar stuff. So like the main products that would be the stars of Imagineering for years. You've got all that. They all exist. So what year are we at now? At what point did you have that full lineup?
Must have been the late 70s. Well, we were making parts. We started making plastic parts, eyes. And we did those because we needed components for our makeup kits, even though we sold them alone. So I'm guessing we're pretty close to we're in the mid to late 70s now. I would guess somewhere.
How old would you have been at that point?
A lot younger than I am now.
What?
We all were.
Yeah.
I mean, you were pretty young when you started this whole thing, right?
Yeah, when we first put Evil Feet out, I think I was maybe 22, 23.
Yeah, so these early days of Imagineering, this is happening when you're in your 20s.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a crazy ride because it was makeup. FDA was really getting involved. It was just, we had a lot of little in-between problems. One of them was a really neat product called Scab.
Scab?
Scab. And the problem with Scab was it was a byproduct of something else, and we couldn't make enough of it to sell.
I've never even heard of that.
So we could only sell it to people who used it like in the makeup industry. What Scab was is when you made vampire blood, we had like a 700-gallon vat, and we made it 700 gallons at a time. It would foam at the top. And if you skimmed off that foam, and put it to the side, it would dry, and then you could put it on your skin again to do just like creepy skin, all kinds of stuff with it. But we couldn't make it a product because it was a byproduct of something else that we couldn't make enough of it. We couldn't figure out how to.
But you did offer it at some point. It was actually for sale?
Yeah, I think at some point, I think Barry was involved with it.
Yeah, I came to you, Larry, when I saw the foaming and the dried sheets of it, and I said, "Well, can I play around with this?" And oh my gosh, all you needed was a spritz bottle of water, and maybe a sculpting tool, and it would get wet and flexible enough, and you could move it around, and you could put blood on it, which was a harmonious combination of the two products. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. And I actually showed the product before anything could be done with it, as far as our problem of being able to make enough. And you remember Dan Clancy trying to take a blender and foam it up and put giant sheets on the roof and trying to get it to dry in the Arizona sun? And he was like big cookie sheets trying to get it to dry, the foam. And we tried everything to make that byproduct. And it was so wonderful. It was really a great product. Yeah.
And before you go off that, Larry, there's probably something that Ray doesn't know, but I seem to recall a little bit of an incident with that big vat of blood.
Yeah, by then we had our own manufacturing facility and a couple of very, very big vats, 700, 500-gallon vats that we mixed the blood. And I came in there one night by myself. We had a rule after this incident that there was a rule saying you couldn't work down there by yourself. You had to have somebody else down there with you. But we probably had 50, 60 employees by then. And I came down at night, which I often did, and I opened the top of a vampire blood vat and leaned over and fell in.
They were that big?
And there was a big propeller going on. Yeah, it was a big thing. And there was a propeller going around there. So ultimately what I did is there was a building pole right next to the vat. Is I took my pants off, swung it around this pole and wrapped around it, and I pulled myself out of the vat and hit the floor like a dead fish. And then I was red from the waist down for the next week. Yeah, we had some crazy stuff.
Yes.
We also made product under other people's names. Another thing that we had, this really is a terrible story, but it's funny if you get 20 years away from it. We made a keychain called Fingers and Toes. And during the process of packaging, this pile of fingers and toes that were on the floor, there must have been thousands of them there. Somebody in the package, using a packaging label, ran their finger across the blade, cut their finger off, and it fell into the pile of fingers and toes. And I don't know where it is. We never found it.
Did it get packaged and sent off? With
what we were doing is putting keychains on it. I don't know, somebody maybe starting their Ford Bronco with it these days. But anyway, we had some crazy stuff happen. And
were these fingers, was it the same mold as this or completely different?
No, I think that's that. And I think that is a sleeve that you're supposed to put over your finger.
Right.
Yeah, these were hard resin keychains.
Oh.
And we made them for a company called Raspberry.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Raspberry. They made a lot of what they called jigglers, like rubber characters that were really jiggly.
Yeah. And one of the big products was called Marble Garble.
I don't know that.
You never remember that. Anyway, we had a lot of crazy things happen.
So I didn't know your operation was so big. You had vats of blood with propellers that you could fall into.
Yeah, when I was, right when in '90, I think it was late '80s, when I sold the Imagineering, we had at peak. Well, we actually went into the retail business. There was a short period in that we had just on the minus side of 5,000 employees.
Wow.
We weren't tiny. And between China and Hong Kong and the U.S., probably had around 100, somewhere around 100,000 square feet of real estate.
So in the early days, it was pretty much just you, right? Like the first few years.
Me and my brother. My brother, bless his soul, was, we've been friends and partners and since the very beginning.
So before we get to Barry and Gino, when they enter this story, can you tell me about this illustrator? Who
Gordon Vigis.
What?
Gordon Vigis is his name.
Tell me about him.
Wonderful guy. He's no longer with us, but very, very talented man. And we did a bunch of products together, and some of them were gift products. They were just sculpts that he did. He had a unique style of artwork. Whether it was sculpting or doing artistic graphics. I met him. He was with an advertising company I was using for something or other. And this had to be way back. It had to be in the very late 60s, probably, when I met Jordan. And I'd used a bunch of artists, and it all worked. But when Barton came along using his style, and his lines like "Don't scare your mother," everything just really hit. Gordon and I had a relationship for probably 25 years. He lived in Phoenix and ultimately moved away. And as we got into the bigger things, like the face, we needed actual photographs and people. The type of graphics that Gordon didn't work for that. But he did everything for probably 15 years. He did every product he put out in one way or another.
Because I think he really shaped the perception of Imagineering just from a kid standpoint.
He did the logo, by the way.
The mustache.
Yeah, he did the Imagineering logo.
There it is.
Yeah.
Well, so Barry and Gino, who came into the picture first?
I came in next, and then Gino.
All right. So Barry, tell me, how did you get involved with Imagineering?
Well, I was just going to mention about the artwork, Larry. His style always kind of reminded me of Mad Magazine. That there was kind of a Mad Magazine look to the boy that you're talking about, the artwork with the fangs and everything and the blood and all that. He just kind of reminded me of that Mad Magazine kind of thing going on that you would see in the columns around the edge, that Sergio Aragonés would draw. And I just remember that style. I came into the picture totally fluke, out of the blue, 1 in a million, winning like a lottery ticket story. I was working for Universal Studios on the tour, and we had a makeup show. This was my first job in Los Angeles, working in Los Angeles. I had moved down from Santa Barbara, and I had gotten a 1 day a week guarantee working and doing the makeup show at Universal. And when I wasn't working at the makeup show, I was going around seeing who I could work with and be involved with in Los Angeles. And then right away, lucky for me, Universal had a new budget for the summertime, and they gave me a full-time position. And I was so thrilled about that to do the makeup show. I was the only one at the time who wanted to actually be a makeup artist that was doing makeup demonstrations. We would pick a couple out of the audience and we would make them up into the traditional Frankenstein. And we actually used the headpiece molds, not the original molds, but where the headpiece came from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So that headpiece is from the actual molds. We did a press off the molds, and
Was that Glenn Strange?
Hmm?
Was that
Yeah,
Glenn Strange? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was the Glenn Strange head. Yeah, and so uh, we would make up. We would always try to find a couple that was kind of like Mutt and Jeff. It was kind of like you wanted to try to find a boyfriend or a father that would be really tall, and then the girlfriend or the wife would be really short. And so you'd have that comic look of the two. And then the bride was not the traditional bride that we all know. It was a new creation that was created and art directed by two people, Vern Langdon and Bob Zarek up at Universal Studios. And they created this new Bride of Frankenstein, which had a facial appliance and a headpiece appliance with crazy hair. And we did this show 14 times a day in the summer and 4 times a day in the winter. And the turnaround had to be so fast to make the pieces. We were actually making pieces out of urethane, flexible urethane. So that was a new trend that we had created up there to make these pieces because we didn't have to cook the molds, we didn't have to bake them. So it was really a quick turnaround. It was self-curing, and then we would demold. We'd run the foam in the morning, and then we would demold them in the afternoon, and then we'd have to squeeze them and knead them to get all the gas air bubbles out of the urethane. And then we put them on forms and let them air dry for about 72 hours to a week. And then this was a lot faster because I think we had about 7 face piece molds and 7 headpiece molds. So we would just run them every day, and we had backup molds. But how I got involved with Imagineering, which is really unique, was one day, it was my turn to go pick the couples out in the audience, and we had 1,500 people in a full show to watch the demonstration. And I picked this couple, and when at the end, when you're cleaning them up, when the demo's all done, and we would do this whole little skit and show, I started talking. I had made up. I think it was the father, and he was there with his daughter, and he said, "Well, one of my clients in Arizona, I do all his contracts and everything, and I'm his attorney. He has a makeup company." And I said, "Really?" And being ballsy back then, I was chuckling when Larry said the same thing about himself. I said, "Well, one of the problems with these makeup kits and these makeups is they don't have it based in the fact that it's designed by a makeup artist from Hollywood, with that whole background." And I said, "I would really love to meet him, and I think maybe, we could end up doing something together." Well, a month later, I get this phone call out of the blue, and it's Larry. And he says, "Hi, I'm Larry, and I think you met my attorney, and I'm going to be out in L.A., and I'd like to meet you." And I said, "Oh, sounds great." So I left him a pass at Universal, and he came up there and we gave him a tour of our makeup lab and everything. And Larry said, well, I may have a project coming up that you might be perfect for. And I forget, Larry, how much time went by, but you had called me and you said that you had the licensing rights for the face from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that you had this material that you were going to use. And it was interesting how it was created, because I sculpted the whole head thinking it was going to be like a rubber mask, but then it was cut down the middle and they like vacuformed the front half and the back half. And then they were like folded up and put in the box, and they came with like little two-way tape to stick the two halves together. Now, I had sculpted that head fairly big. So when kids put them on, literally you could spin the head around their head because they were floating. They were this material that was really light and like a pressed foam, like a vacuformed foam, and you could spin them around. And I said to Larry, I said, well, Larry, I don't know about this, working. And Larry said, well, I have the licensing rights. I need to use up the rights or I'm going to lose them. So I said, oh, okay. And then how it came about was I was looking at the old Planet of the Ape appliances, and I noticed, well, it's just really on the front of the face. And I said, this material and this technique would be perfect for that, in that it could be pre-packaged in a box. And one of the great things that Larry did, and he agreed with me, because we not only had a vacuformed form, but we also had a clear vacuformed form that went over it to protect the piece. So when it went in the box, and people actually cut those up too and use them on their faces for like alien faces and that. But it protected the face, and then it came with a makeup kit. Now, you have to understand, at the time this came out, there was nothing like it on the market. And the fact that Target or Walmart or whoever bought them, they could stock them on a shelf instead of hanging a mask, on a hook, and 50 million kids wearing them, this.
So Larry, what are you holding? We can't hear you. Lost your audio.
You're on mute, Larry.
Yeah, it would help if I took myself off of mute.
So Larry, tell us what you're holding up there.
All right. Barry would do a sculpt. And after he did a sculpt, we would wind up making a thing. At that time, we call it Tuffy. And we would make a mold, a negative mold. We'd put that on his sculpting and make a negative mold. We'd get that negative mold out, and then from that, we would make a metal piece, all with a special metal process we had, and we would vacuum form that. And this you could put then flat on a vacuum former. And when you put it flat on the vacuum former, I gotta get one more picture. Okay, when you put it flat on the vacuum former, you would get this. You would get a soft, what we call Wētā, we call it flexoscan piece.
Yeah, bring that back. Bring that into the camera range. There we go. So is that a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Yes, it is.
Gino, you sculpted that, didn't you?
So then you can paint that piece, and when you painted the piece, you can see on the back, there's a vacuum form piece that holds it in shape.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you cut it apart, cut the mouth off and put this where your jaw is and this the top and you blend it all in, you come up with this.
That's Jacob.
That is Jacob. Yeah. So that was the process for the face and for this particular process.
This is the face that
you know, and
Barry's
all of
talking
them,
about.
all of them were done this way.
This one's open, so I can.
Brian, when I was going through crap, I read across all this a couple of days ago.
I think, Gino, you sculpted the turtle face. I know I didn't.
I think so, yeah.
I know I didn't.
Well, just to finish, Ray, what I was saying, what was really great was that this could be stocked on a shelf instead of hanging on a hook. And that was a big difference also from a hygiene standpoint, that a child or an adult wasn't putting the mask on and it was being tried 50 million times. So it was really a unique way to have this be a makeup kit.
So, Barry, so what was, Larry, were you developing the face before Barry came on board?
No. Basically, for years, I wanted to do a concept of being able to knock down like Pilot VH, but I had no idea how to do it. Mm-hmm. Then I ran across this Wētā material, which was very flexible. And between Barry and myself, we just basically conspired and came up with the face. And the face, by the way, took Imagineering to a whole new level. It made it a multi-million-dollar company.
Wow. So it started, so Barry was talking about Close Encounters. Barry, you first came on board for this, right? That was your assignment.
Right. That's very rare. That is probably rarer than a face kit. Because Larry, that was only produced, what, one season?
One season, and we didn't do well with it.
You didn't do well. Well,
no, it's complicated.
I can insert a picture of me here as a kid. I think I've got a picture of me wearing that in childhood, and I've got like a windbreaker on. So I had one. I put it together. I cut it out, and one of you told me once that it was really oversized.
Yeah. I didn't say that, but it is. It is oversized.
Did you sculpt that, Barry?
Yeah, that was the first thing I ever sculpted for Larry, and I said, "Well, Larry, I hope you'll be happy with it." And Larry looked at me. He said, "Whatever I get, I get." And he was very open about it. And we had a time crunch. I remember that I had to get it done in a certain amount of time. Is that right, Larry?
Yeah.
Yeah, and. But the light bulb went on. I mean, for both Larry and I, we were like, well, this is a natural for facial appliances. It was such a natural. It was right in front of us. And the light bulb just went on. And I said, I was looking at Planet of the Ape appliances, and I said, man, we've got to do an ape face, which we did in the first 6 styles. That was, I think the ape and the skeleton were the 2 most popular in that first grouping.
Ape face.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a skeleton, unfortunately. And at some point you guys switched to this darker box. When did that happen?
Larry, how far into it was that the new updated look?
That's when I was working there. Jim Sauter, who was in charge of the art department there, came up with that packaging. Remember, Larry?
No, I really don't remember. I remember the white box, and I remember the dark box. I don't know how we moved from one to the other. It probably
the dark box is kind of like the later era of Imagineering, I think.
Yeah.
Things were changing by then. And this space kit blew up the company into a multi-million-dollar operation. That was your big breakthrough product.
Yeah, at that time, right, it was. We patented everything. As a matter of fact, Barry, I ran across some of the earlier patent papers, and I'll send you one of these days.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But
I think we're both...
we patented everything. The mechanical way of putting it together, so it was years before anybody figured out a way to knock us off. But
did anyone ever create another face kit? I don't think anyone created anything like what we did.
Yeah, they did.
Did they? I've never seen anything. So
Ruby's did. Ruby's knocked it off years later.
I remember some years later, I was still sort of a kid or maybe a teenager then. There were people making latex rubber things that were obviously trying to be in the same vein as the face, but they weren't foam. They were rubber, so it wasn't the same thing.
And they were much more expensive.
Mm.
You have to understand there are only, in this era of loving monsters and kids reading famous monsters of filmland, and this whole era of time, these young kids want to become makeup artists. And there were only two products on the market that did that for them. One was the face, which I think, Larry, you had told me at one point we sold over 750,000 kits. And there was Dick Smith's various makeup kits that were very popular, that were done, I think, for Pressman.
Another gelatin.
And we knocked him off, Barry. We did a number of kits. I mean, Smith was a genius. And to me, he was the first one that came along and figured out how to do these monster makeup things that anybody could do in their home.
Right.
Anybody could do in their kitchen. You didn't have to be a makeup artist. You can scoop oatmeal up on your face and become a mummy or whatever the hell. So a number of kits that Imagineering made were modeled after things that Dick Smith were modeled after his concepts of how to do something. It was really quite a genius.
Well, yeah, he did the whole gelatin, mixing the gelatin and the two-piece vacuforms together. You sandwiched it in between, right? And then you let it set up, you put it in the refrigerator, and you made the pieces. And those kits I know now go for a lot of money. I have like one or two, but they're not in very good shape. But I think he did like maybe three different kits. He did a gorilla kit, and I can't remember, a regular like monster kit, and then a third one, and I can't remember what the third one was.
I don't remember.
Larry had one of the gorilla ones, and I remember opening it up, and I poured plaster into the negatives. So I've still got the plaster positives of the gorilla.
All
Is
right.
he still with us,
No, unfortunately, Dick's passed on.
So I know Gino spent some time with him in New Zealand, I think.
He's been here. He's been right, standing right where you stood, right behind me there. With.
So, Gino, you worked with Dick Smith, or were you friends with him, or?
Friends. It was we never quite worked together, but he was excuse me, like so many people, he inspired so many people. He was literally the godfather of makeup, and he did the Godfather of makeup as well. When I was working at Imagineering, a really good friend of mine in Phoenix, his name is David Ayers, who's another makeup effects artist, and he worked for a while in Los Angeles, but ended up I think the pressure was too much, and he ended up coming back to Mesa, Arizona, and started his own little mini mask making company called Bladder Masks and stuff. But he was friends with Dick Smith and corresponded with Dick quite a bit. And so I would go to visit David, and David had this great little makeup lab, and faces on the walls and everything. It was incredible. And in fact, David even worked on Close Encounters at one time.
That's right.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just really quickly, it's like I would send my sculptures and stuff to David for him to critique, as well as I did Barry. But there was a time when David Ayers said, he says, well, your stuff's getting pretty good. I think you should send it to Dick Smith and let him critique it for you. And it's like, oh, no, I'm not ready for that. He goes, no, seriously, just like, here's his number. Give him a call, because he looks at everybody's stuff, and he'll be totally honest with you and tell you if it's good or not. And so I said, okay. So I had his number, and for the longest time, I would call his number. This is when he was living in Larchmont, New York, and I'd call, and his answering machine would come on, and it says, and Dick Smith talked like this. He had a little bit of a lift. He goes, "Hello, this is Dick Smith. I'm sorry I can't take a call." And I'd always hang up. I'd never leave a message. And finally, one time I called, and he goes, "Hello," and I thought, "Oh, okay, I'm going to leave a message this time." He goes, "Hello," and I thought, "Oh shit, it's him." And I said, "Mr. Smith?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Hi, my name is Gino Acevedo, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm good friends with David Ayers." "Oh, I know David. He's a great guy." And I said, "Well, I work for a company called Imagineering." And I said, "Yeah, I think I've heard of them." And I said, "Well, David, I've been doing a lot of sculptures and stuff of masks and things, and David suggested that I send you some photos of my work so you could critique it for me." And he goes, "Huh? Well, you realize that I'm a very busy man." And I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And he goes, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to decline." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's okay." And he said, "But you keep throwing your stuff to David, and you take care." And that was it. And I was devastated. It's like, oh no. So I called David right away, and he said, "Did you ever call Dick?" And I said, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with him." And he says, "Oh, great. So you're going to send him some of your stuff?" And he says, "No." He said he had to decline. He says, "You're kidding." He says, "He looks at everybody's stuff." I said, "No, he declined." And anyways, so many years later, when I finally moved to Los Angeles, I was working for a company called ADI, Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, and we were working on a movie called Death Becomes Her with Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn and Bruce Willis. And Dick was a makeup consultant on it. And so we were playing around with a new material, a new silicone material for making the animatronic puppets of Meryl Streep and Goldie. And so we invited Dick to come over to our workshop at ADI. And so he came over, and we started talking. We all went out to lunch, and I was sitting next to him at lunchtime. And he goes, he used to call me Dino for some reason. Dino, so Dino, where are you from? I said, "Oh, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona." I said, I work for a Halloween company out there called Imagineering. He goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And I said, "I'm friends with David Ayers." He goes, "Oh, I know David. He's a great guy." And I said, "Well, this is kind of a funny story, but David gave me your number and told me that I should start sending my sculptures and stuff for you to critique." And he said, "Oh, okay. Did you call me?" I said, "Yeah, I did. And I said, and I said, "So where's your stuff?" I said, "Well, you said that you're very busy and you had to decline." He goes, "You're kidding. I look at everybody's stuff." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I heard." But anyway, so that was a kind of funny story about the Dick Smith thing.
But he never explained like why he didn't look at he wasn't like, "Oh, I remember I was busy with this or that at that time."
He didn't say. No, he couldn't remember or anything. But and then many years later, when I finally moved to New Zealand and stuff, it was a bit of a present that Richard Taylor and Peter Jackson brought Dick out here for a bit of a holiday. So he came out for like 3 weeks and just hung out with us in the shop. And this is probably when we were working on the third part of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and he came out and worked with us and stuff. And so we hung out together, and he came over to the house here for dinner. And I told him the story again. I said, "Where are you from, Dino?" I said, "Well, yeah." I told him the story again, and then again he couldn't remember. And he said, "Oh, that's funny because I look at everybody's stuff." Yeah.
He did that. So 3 times you got that. You encountered him, and then 2 times he said, "Oh, I look at everybody's stuff."
Yeah.
You went through this twice. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so Gino, not Dino, Gino, tell us how you got involved with Imagineering.
So great stories. Like back in 7th, 8th grade, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was always into animals and everything, especially reptiles and things, because we have so many of those critters out there. And I became great friends with my 7th and 8th grade science teacher. His name is Francis Reinprecht. And it was at 8th grade that I graduated to go to high school. And even when I went to high school, Camelback High School, I would still come over and take care of all the animals because he had all these great, lizards and snakes and all sorts of stuff. And I'd still come over and take care of them. And I guess it was probably towards the end of my senior year, Francis said, "I've just got this new student teacher that's come to help me. And her name's Patricia Liff. And she just married this gentleman by the name of Larry Liff. and who owns a Halloween company or something. And I know that you love Halloween and love drawing and all that kind of stuff and love monsters. So I told her, I said, that maybe you could put together a portfolio and see if she could, get something set up so that you can have an interview with Larry. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that sounds cool. And so I did. I worked on my portfolio. I graduated from high school, and I started going part-time over to Phoenix College. And I called and made an appointment to go and see Larry. And I remember it was in June. And as of course, June in Phoenix is not a great time because it's so hot. It was probably like 115 degrees. And I went over to have my meeting with Larry to meet him for the first time. And I dressed up, and I was wearing my Sears tan polyester 3-piece suit that I had from graduation. And my parents had bought me a car. They bought me a used 2-door Toyota Celica with no air conditioning. So I had to drive way on the other side of Phoenix over to 59th Avenue, and took about a good half hour to get there. And I go in there, walk in the door, and meet the receptionist there. And in the corner, I'll never forget, because it had a stack of about 6 of the face heads in there. There were the appliances stuck on little mannequin heads. And I thought, oh, this is cool, masks and stuff. And Larry came around the corner, and I stood up. And the first thing Larry ever said to me, he said, "Oh, my, you're a big one," because I'm about 6'3", to 285. And anyway, so we went into his office, and I showed him my portfolio of drawings of Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of stuff. And Larry says, "Well, I just eventually I want to get into doing some masks." Some latex and vinyl masks. I said, but I'm not quite ready to do that yet. It's probably going to be another 6 months. So I'm really sorry, but I don't really have any. I can't offer you a job for anything right now. I said, the only thing I have is to work out in the production line. And he says, and I don't think he'd like that because it's pretty monotonous. And I said, So anyways, but he said, let me give you a tour. So we went through the hallways. I never forget going through the hallways, and these double doors opened up into the factory, where it was, and I felt like Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I just saw all these machines. I saw the machine making the fake blood, which I knew very well, and they were making the face and all these other different makeup kits and stuff. And I was in heaven. I thought, this is incredible. So I've never seen a factory actually produce stuff like that. And Larry said, well, this is the factory, and so there's I don't think you'd want to work out here. And I said, yes, I do. So he said, okay, well, if you do, I can put you out here for 6 months, and and then if you're still around, maybe we can talk about, start doing some masks and stuff. So I did 6 months. I worked out there, and I was making the fake blood. And my first job was making the face. I worked on the big vacuform machine with this guy by the name of Carol, who was like this big biker guy with really long hair, and he was the one who was running the machine. And so the things would come off the conveyor belt, and I would have to get them and stack them in the boxes and things. And that was just, I'll never forget that. That was really cool to see. And as I said, for 6 months, I worked on a production line, just jumping around all the different areas and working on the different makeup kits and things. And every now and then I'd see Larry walking through the plant and stuff, and I'd go, "Hi, Larry, I'm still here." And Larry'd be going like, "Oh God, he's still here." So after the 6 months, Larry, pulled me aside, and he said, "Well, I think it's time." And so he gave me my own little room where I could start, practicing and doing some sculpting and stuff. I think I may have told him that I could sculpt, which I couldn't. I hadn't sculpted since I played with Play-Doh, and so then, anyways, I just kind of started with that. And then the way that I met Barry was every year Larry would have a photo shoot to show off all the new makeup kits and everything like that. And we would go to a place called Dave Siegel's photography place. And Barry would fly in from Los Angeles. And so Larry told me all about Barry, about this Hollywood makeup artist. And he was working at CBS at the time. And so that's how I kind of met Barry. And the thing that's so ironic about this whole thing is that my whole fascination with there he is, noted Hollywood makeup artist.
I get a lot of notes.
Yeah. And the thing that's so ironic about this whole thing, and the thing that wanted me to get into the makeup industry was Planet of the Apes. The original one was I was so fascinated by that and loved the movies, and I'm a huge apes fanatic anyway. But I saw this documentary on John Chambers, who was the gentleman who created the makeups and things for Planet of the Apes. And as it turns out, after I met Barry and stuff, Barry told me that he knew John Chambers and knew him very well. And I just thought, wow, this has gone full 360. You know, to imagine to meet somebody who actually knows John. And Barry actually introduced me to. I got a picture here somewhere. I don't know where it's at, but I got to meet John Chambers. But I think what happened too is I think Barry saw a bit of himself in me when he was younger, and so he kind of took me under his wing. And I would fly to Los Angeles and go see Barry, and Barry kind of showed me and introduced me to a lot of the famous makeup artists, you know, that were my heroes, the Rick Bakers, and of course John Chambers, and all those guys, and Dave Miller, and from there, it's like I thought, wow, this would be a dream come true to work out here. But you know, I was very content at Imagineering, and Barry would always say, "You got to come out here to work," and it's like, no, I'm not ready yet. And so this went on for many years. And but then there was a time when Barry said, "Look, I've got a job for you." I said, "No, Barry, I'm not ready to come out there yet," because I was always worried that I wasn't going to get enough work and things. And also the problem that I had was my mom was quite sick. She had cancer, so I was always afraid to leave and just leave her behind. And but Mom was great. She was always pushing me. It's like, he says, you know, you've got to follow your dream. I said, sounds like a great opportunity. But it turns out Barry said, look, it's just a part-time gig. It's over at NBC to work on a show called the Dick Clark Show called Friday Night Surprise. And Bob Scribner was the head of the makeup department at NBC at the time. And he said, you know, I've talked to Bob, and they need somebody to make some prosthetics. And so it was for like 3 weeks, I think, something like that. And so I talked to Larry and asked him if I could take a leave of absence. Of course, Larry said, yes, of course. And so I did that. I went out there and did the gig out there. And I had to turn Alan Hale from Gilligan's Island into W.C. Fields and Bob Denver into Mae West with prosthetics and stuff. Anyways, I had like a week left over. And as I said, Barry had already introduced me to Dave Miller, who Dave Miller is probably best known for creating the first Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. And by this time, he was
He's
working.
a makeup artist. He created Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And by this time, he was working on part 5, called The Dream Child. And Dave said, he says, look, you've got a week left. I said, do you want to come help me sculpt Freddy? And it's like, oh my God, yeah. So I did that, you know. And towards the end of the week, I got a phone call that my mom had sadly passed away, and I was just devastated. I went back home and I just kind of realized that, you know, there was nothing really holding me back there anymore. And Larry was always trying to kick me out of the nest anyway. And he said, look, you've gone as far as you can here. You know, this is a great opportunity for you. And he says, look, you can still design and make stuff for me. You can just do it over in LA and ship it back to me. So it was kind of like a win-win situation, you know, that I couldn't really pass up. And so I packed up the bags and moved to LA. And as I said, I was there for 15 years, worked on some amazing films, and just, you know, got a huge amount of experience, and eventually found my way here to work on the Lord of the Rings. And
I gotta interject here. Gino, I kept trying to drag your butt out so many times, and it's true. His mother, and you got to respect him for that and everything. But, you know, Gino would keep on saying, gee, do you think I'll get any work? Do you think? And I saw actually a lot of the guys out here that were working, and Gino was as good as them, if not better in certain areas. And of course, he couldn't know that, but I said, look, come live with me, come stay with me, you know. And if you remember, you stayed with me, I forget how long. But I said, you don't have to worry about rent or anything. And Gino's correct. I really did see Gino. I call Gino my little brother, you know, because I'm 6'5", and I'm a big guy too. So I saw a lot of myself in Gino. And
so the two of us, when we go out to dinner, we'd go to a buffet place, and they go, no, sir, we're closed.
We closed. No more food. Yeah. But the thing is I I truly believe in the thing about giving back, and Gino was one of a few people that I felt if I was going to invest in someone, it would be Gino. And so I really saw a lot of myself in him, and I saw that he was truly dedicated and loved it. And I said, well, if I'm gonna roll the dice and I'm gonna put anything into anyone, it's gonna be Gino. And Larry and I talked, and we even said together, well, let's get his butt out here and see what he can do. And you never had to go home. You never had to look back. You just kept on going forward to where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, so Imagineering and with Larry, it really was the golden key that opened up so many doors for me. And with his love and friendship, and he is my second father, and I love him and love his family, and of course and then of course meeting Barry, and my big brother, and yeah, it's just being at the right place at the right time and the knowing people, and all the stars aligned. Just kind of like with Barry's story about what are the chances of meeting somebody in the audience that happens to be Larry's attorney. If that had never happened, then I would have never met Barry, and I would have never met Larry, and so who knows where I'd be.
Yeah, it's just crazy how everything was meant to be. Everything fell into play. I never expected to hear from Larry. I really didn't. And then when the phone rang, it's like everything fell into place, and it was so magical. And the truth of the matter is, Ray, is that you couldn't recreate this today because the industry has changed so much. And this story would not have the effect it had back then. Back then, like Gino said, all the stars kind of aligned, and it's true. It was really amazing that everything fell into place the way it did, and yeah, the three of us, I think we consider each other family, and I know Larry's going through a tough time right now, so we're all there for you, Larry. We're all thinking about you. You know that.
Thank you.
Well, Imagineering had a kind of naivete to that I don't know how that would work today. Like now we have Spirit Halloween store. Halloween is a more grown up. I mean, kids still participate, but it seems like a more grown up holiday these days. And when I was a kid, Imagineering, it was almost like a lifestyle brand. It wasn't just like for purpose, like I need some blood, so this is the blood product. I mean, it was more, I knew what Imagineering was. I knew the logo, I knew the illustrations, I knew all the different products. So I was an Imagineering kid. I think a lot of kids were. Even beyond Halloween, we liked the attitude of Imagineering. There was an attitude towards it.
It's very homegrown.
Yeah, and so like a lot of these companies like Don Post or Distortions Unlimited or Topstone or any Ben Cooper, they all had a personality, all these things, and kids would gravitate towards one or the other. But I know when I was a kid, I always looked forward to going into the little stores like Ben Franklin or the drugstores or some of the bigger shops like Kresge or Kmart around Halloween. I want to know where's the Imagineering stuff. And particularly Ben Franklin had a whole end cap that was just Imagineering, and I just like looking through it. It wasn't like I want this for Halloween. I just wanted it. I wanted Imagineering stuff. Even it didn't matter whether I was going to use it. Actually, I did, but that wasn't the point. The point was I just liked the concept of all this stuff. I liked the smells and the textures, and I liked the whole attitude, like scare your mom, scare your sister. I would do that. I would put it on there and go, and try to scare people. So, and then later with the face, believe me, when I started using the face, my brother and I both had for several years used the face kits. I thought I was Hollywood makeup artist for sure. I thought there's Dick Smith and me. When I was painting this little foam, these little kids, it made me feel like a Hollywood makeup artist. I mean, I bought the copy on the box. I bought that whole thing, like just like a Hollywood makeup artist. I bought that hook, line, and sinker. That experience of feeling like, oh, this is real makeup, that was exciting for a kid, and it inspired a lot of imagination because of all those things. You could personalize. You'd make it look the way you want it to look. Instead of buying a mask that was as it was, you painted it, you put it together, and you could get different paints or different adhesives. Like, for instance, I didn't use the tape that came with it. I would use spirit gum. So you could personalize it or buy extra hair and stuff and dress it up.
You could take it off and reuse it.
Yes, I tried. It didn't always work so well for me, but I hated to throw that stuff away. I would hold on to it for as long as I could.
You know, there's, if I can interject, two aha moments for me with the face. One was when I would go on interviews for jobs after I left CBS and I was freelancing, and I would go into a shop where I felt intimidated. I remember going in, I'm trying to remember the artist's name. Anyway, he's very well known, and I opened my portfolio, and in the back, I had one of the sheets on the face. It just happened to be in there, in the sleeve. And he goes, "What's this?" And he pulls it out, and he goes, "The face?" He said, "Oh my God, you did the face when I was a kid. This was what made me want to become a makeup artist." And he goes, "My God, you did those." And of course, I got the job, I think more because of that, in my portfolio. And there was that aha moment. And the other one for me that really, really hit it home for me was because I'm a big Disney fan. I love everything about Disney, as far as how I feel like when you go to one of the theme parks, it's like walking onto a real movie set. The way they do the facades and the way they do all the architecture, everything is well thought out, and it's like a living, breathing set. But I went into the magic shop on Main Street, and I went into the magic shop, and there was a whole area just devoted to the face kit. And I took a picture of it, and I have to this day the picture in the magic shop at Disneyland of the face kit on display. And that really kind of brought it around for me too, as far as my collecting of Disney memorabilia.
Before time gets away from us, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other Imagineering products. So Larry, you branched out into more of what I would call like novelty things, like those skeleton hands and the blinky eyeball, and more like almost like joke type items. So what was the thought between branching out into that kind of stuff, away from the makeup type stuff? And did you make all that in-house?
I never really wanted to go into makeup. When I first started out, my goal was to get into these electronic novelty items, talking skulls, all that type of stuff. And every time I tried to put something like that in Imagineering slide, people would say to me, "No, you're makeup. You're not." I couldn't sell any of it. I mean, nobody wanted to buy any of it. So when I sold Imagineering, I started a company called Take One. And what Take One did was no makeup at all. It did all of these specialty novelty items that I talked about. We did very, very well. We grew the company substantially. We did things like voice changers and talking skulls and dancing skeletons and all this little stuff, and did very well with it. And I remember during that process, I said to myself, you know what? We need to add a makeup line. I mean, I spent years and years doing makeup. So Take One is going to we put in a makeup line, and everybody came in and looked and said, "What are you doing with makeup? You're electronics." So basically, it started at the Take One started in the last couple of years of Imagineering. It wasn't its own company, but we started to introduce items with blinking eyes and all those types of things that you said. And they were much more oriented to masks and makeup than they were to just being items that would serve an electronic purpose, electronic entertainment purpose. And we got away with that. We sold it all very, very well. That's how we got into those items. It was really the desire to get much deeper into the entertainment value of Halloween than just makeup.
So if you could have done that in the first place, would you, back in the 60s, if you could have went right into that kind of product, is that what you would have done?
That was my dream, and no, it's not what I could have done. I was thinking that my base is makeup. That's what I do well. And if I can get it out in the marketplace, and a lot of it was, Raymond, was just simply that I was broke. And looking for, and I knew everybody, I, like you, as a younger person, really loved playing around with makeup. If there was a school holiday that had characters, I would be made up. I would make myself up, and I would do all of the same things that you probably did when you were younger. I just got to be older and quicker than you've gotten older. So, but no, I think if I had an opportunity to begin with, and I did try many times, I would have, makeup wouldn't have been my first choice.
So as Imagineering went into the 80s, it started to branch out into more variety of products. I remember there was a skull, it's kind of like what you're talking about. There was a talking skull called Through Boris.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where you were going with that electronic kind of a product. That was more, then when you did Take One, was it more that kind of a thing?
Well, that was one of the things. We did a bunch of things with voice changers, and that was a little box with some electronics in it that would alter the way your voice talked. So you would wear this on your belt, and you'd have like a little headset with a microphone on it, and you could then talk, and then if you wanted to sound like an alien voice, you could get a high squeaky voice. You'd talk into the mic in your regular voice, and this little box would convert it. So we did a lot of that, and then we started using that in things like masks. So you could be a Darth Vader and actually talk to people and sound like Darth Vader. So but we're much more into the whole character experience, not just the makeup part of it.
And I know in the later years, you did start doing latex masks, because they're like right now on eBay, there's some Imagineering latex masks. They're not like Don Post masks, they're more partial masks, but you did get into that latex realm. Oh, is that one now? Is that one of them?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's
Gino and I went to a Halloween party someplace down in Mexico one year, and he went as a werewolf.
That matches your beard really well, Gino.
Well, this was a concept we introduced, and it was a very big concept. Raymond did extremely well for us, and that is that one of the problems with a mask is they're hot. It's hard to breathe with them on. You can't eat with them on. So what we did is we separated everything above the jaw from the jaw and everything below the jaw. So you put them on as two separate pieces, and that allowed you to do what he's doing. And that was a huge, it was a huge success for us. And then we added blinking eyes to it. We did all kinds of other crap with it.
Yeah,
So
Barry did a series called The Zappers.
That's right. The
Gosh,
Zappers.
I forgot all about that. Yeah. Well, Larry, when did you start with Gino? You two started Cine Art, right?
Mm.
Yeah, what happened is Imagineering wound up being, in the end, we had a bunch of retail stores. We were in 47 or 48 of the 50 states. We had 5,000 employees. That was the retail end of it. And what was your question?
When did you start Cine Art?
Oh, okay. So what happened is I sold all of that, and for about the third time, retired. That retirement lasted a couple of weeks. And then the opportunity, in talking to Barry, talking to Gino, the opportunity came up for really doing life-size replicas of, at least to start with, the Universal Monster characters. And we started a company called Cine Art. The first item we did was Frankenstein, and we made him as a head that you could just make up totally. It was just a blank piece of resin. The painted ones, the painted ones, the hair with them. At one time, he made a full 6-foot high Frankenstein with eyes that track you. Huh?
A full figure, a whole body?
Whole body. Yeah. And the eyes track. We put a mechanism in it that allowed the eyes to track you. So if you walked in front of it, its eyes followed you. And we sold a very limited amount of it, not enough to keep staying in business. But we sold Dick Van Dyke, a full-size life Frankenstein figure.
Yeah, and Dick Van Dyke's a big monster guy.
Big Halloween. Big Halloween
party, and he'd buy a couple of new items every year for his Halloween party. But anyway, that's what Cine Art did. And it lasted 4 or 5 years, probably not even that long, maybe it's 3, 4 years. And then I shut that down and then slowly went into what I'm doing now, which has nothing to do with Halloween or makeup or animatronic products.
So Cine Art made 3 main characters, right? The Frankenstein, the Phantom, and the Lugosi Dracula. Is that correct?
It started right. What we wanted to do, my desire, the first thing I wanted to do was Dracula. Well, we went to Bella Jr., and it was very difficult because to do one of these characters, there were double licenses. You had to license the image from Universal, and you had to license the character from the family. So to do Dracula, I needed Bela Lugosi Jr.'s license and Universal's. Universal said yes. Junior said no. So we did Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And after Frankenstein, we went to Bela, and he said no. I told you no the first time, and it's no the second time. Did he ever give
a reason? Why would he not want a bust of his...
He was afraid that it wouldn't come out properly. He was an attorney. Mm-hmm. Very interesting guy, soft-spoken, but that was his way. So he went to Lon Chaney Jr., and we licensed Phantom from him and Universal. And we got that one out there, and it did very successful for us. And then Bela came to us and said, gee, I wish you'd do Dracula. So we cut that license. And while we were making Dracula, which is the most brilliant one of all we did, it's just a spectacular piece. We had a falling out with Universal. A bunch of new people came in. Our deal with Universal is we got to license and sell all the characters, and we did that, and we did them for their style guides free for them. We didn't charge them anything. There's no number of people who came in and said, now we're going to charge you for a license. So we stopped. In the middle, they never got a piece of Dracula. Josie never got a piece of Dracula. We made 3 or 4 of them. They have to be very valuable now. Gino has one. I don't think Barry has one.
No, I've searched. I didn't know if they were out there or not.
No, they're not. There's 3 or 4, 3 in existence. I have one, Gino has one, and my brother has one.
Really? Because I mean, I'm sure it's very rare, but I could swear like that Dracula with the swirly cape that I've seen that.
Yeah. I've seen it online too, and said to myself, I don't know where the hell they got it.
Oh.
Huh.
I think it's like a bootleg.
Well, the guy who sculpted it is a very, very talented guy, a guy named Miles Tevis. He did all the sculpting, all that work, and there are a few people involved with the process as we move through it, where it's possible that a piece got made and that's where it went.
Does he have the molds, Larry?
Who?
Does Miles Tevis have the molds?
No. David Cronin was it David Cronin that did all that work, Gino?
Yeah.
David Cronin, who isn't here anymore either, is the guy who owned a company called Bone Clones.
Right.
And he developed some very neat technology for casting resin.
Yeah.
And he did all that casting. So it's a possible piece right away there. It's possible somehow Miles has a piece. But from my awareness is there's only 3 pieces. Gino painted them all. Painted all 3 of them. And I have one right here behind me. And I've got my brother's in storage because it means nothing to him right now. And I wanted to make sure it just didn't disappear, Barry.
Right. Well.
Anyway, yeah, that was the last piece.
That's really neat.
Yeah. And then I got out of that business totally. That was Cine Art.
So why did you sell Imagineering?
Well, this might make sense to you. Somewhere around 82, 83, somewhere around there, my bank in Arizona I was their second largest borrower. It wasn't a big bank. It was a small bank, but I was their second largest borrower. And they were purchased by Chase Manhattan Bank. And they looked at the books of this company and said, what the hell are you financing Evil Teeth for? And they pulled their credit line. And we were going to be out of business. None of our customers knew it, but we were going to be out of business.
But you were very successful at that point, right?
Right, but to them, they didn't just, what we made, they didn't want I don't know what the hell it was. They just didn't want to do business with us. We made them money. We made us money. They just didn't want a Halloween company to make Evil Teeth on their books.
Huh.
So they canceled our credit line. What they didn't know is we had factories making money in China. So they couldn't figure out why we were getting money to keep our doors open. So we sued them. We sued the 2 biggest banks in Arizona, we sued the 2 biggest banks in Arizona and Chase Manhattan Bank. And believe it or not, we bought them to their knees. And they reinstated our credit line and basically gave us everything we wanted. It was even a better deal than we had before. But I wound up saying to myself, my God, I'm underfinanced. This has happened once. It can happen again. I'm not going to go through it again. And I put the company on the market and wound up selling it to one of my largest competitors, which was Collegeville.
Right.
They went bankrupt 3 years later.
Well, and Larry, they really did not have the artistic foresight to see what you had done to carry the ball forward. They
didn't realize that Halloween that it had moved from 5-year-old kids to adults who didn't want a picture of a witch on a witch dress.
Yeah.
They just wanted a witch dress. They didn't need, everybody knows they're a witch.
Exactly.
So, anyway, Collegeville purchased it. They went bankrupt about 3 years later, and Ruby's purchased them. They all kept the Imagineering makeup part of the business.
Yeah. You know what's funny, just a funny little side story, and this is just to show you how a company that acquires all the imagery that we did, all the photo shoots and everything that we did. I was in I think it was a Walmart, and they had it was Halloween time to buy Halloween cards, and I always loved looking at all the novelty Halloween cards. And I look at this vampire card, and I'm going, I did this makeup. And it was an Imagineering makeup on a greeting card.
Yep, the artwork's floated all over the place.
Yeah.
There's still some of it out there. But anyway, it was, Imagineering was a great run. I mean, it was like going to the playground every day, right? I mean, it was just, every day was fun. And somehow we wound up making money at doing it.
Yeah, I think we all benefited for it being at the right time and the right place.
Yeah, we did.
And the right people. I mean, it all came together really great. I mean, it was kind of like, I think of those old Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland were going to put on a show movies. And it's like, that's kind of what this was. This was like, well, we're going to do makeup kits. We're going to do, masks, but we're not going to do full masks. We're going to do partial masks. And we're going to do all this stuff. And it was like, you were so behind it all, Larry. You were so, you had the mind and the foresight to not shut something down if you saw the reason for it to be created.
Even if I didn't, we had a hallway in our R&D department that must have been, I don't know, 50 yards, a very, very, very long hallway. And one side of it was covered with cardboard. And what that board was for is anytime you had an idea, you went out and you stuck it on the cardboard. And a lot of our thoughts came just crazy from something somebody thought of in their mind and said, they were always encouraged and always got credit for what, if we put in one of their ideas, they always got credit for it. It was just it was a fun company to be part of.
Yeah.
Can we go around and see, for each of you, Larry, I'll start with you. What's your favorite Imagineering product?
I would say that my favorite one was right at the end of Imagineering, which was talking Through Boris. That might have been taking one. Before that, it would be the face. The face was just so incredibly innovative. It was a way of taking a makeup that, if you had done it in LA, would have cost $400 or $500, and the average guy in the street could come up looking pretty much that same way for $10. I mean, it was really an amazing concept. And everybody tried to knock it off in one way or the other. And now it's just, it's still out there, right? I mean, I'm not saying it anywhere.
The face? No one's selling the face. Is that what you're?
Yeah, if anybody is selling the face, I don't know about it. I don't see.
You mean like currently in production? No one's doing that. If you mean like on the collector market, yeah, it turns out.
Yeah. Well, the collector market is a very interesting market. It goes from 1,000 pieces down to 2 pieces upper in a couple of years.
Right. Gino, what about you? What's your favorite product?
Probably the fake skin. It was just amazing stuff to play with, and I had fun when we would do the the photo shoots and stuff. I eventually, started to assist Barry in some of those shoots and stuff, and started doing my own makeups and things. But I remember there's a kit out there somewhere where I got to make up a guy with a lot of most of the face was just created using the fake skin, and got to do some pretty gory stuff with it. So, I mean, that was great. But of course, the face was a real game changer, as Barry was saying, just for a lot of kids growing up, and you as well, Ray. I think it really inspired so many young kids to want to become a makeup artist, because, as you said, you found yourself, just as we all did, to say, "Wow, I can do this. I can transform somebody, and make them into another character and stuff." So that was pretty cool. It was an amazing place to be and to be a part of.
Barry, what about you?
Well, I'd have to say, first and foremost, vampire fangs. And I came to Larry years later and said, wouldn't it be great if we could try to do some growing vampire fangs? I could never make it happen. And then Larry found a guy to make it happen. And I thought, well, that's cool, that you actually got to make it work. And the other thing I would say is, like Larry and Gino says, the face. We created 18 different styles at one point. And that's quite a bit of different styles and looks.
Which one's your favorite?
Well, I would say the skeleton, because it's black, white. You got the heavy contrast. So in low light at a party, if you're wearing a hood with a skeleton face, and you don't have to be really that creative. You just put black around the eyes and black in between the lower jaw and the upper piece. And, and you could put black on your neck and powder it, and you were done. And you could use spirit gum and that would be it. But if you wanted to be more creative, I would say the other one is the ape face, So, and we tried to do something like a Creature of the Black Lagoon. We did a fish face. That was kind of just our comical takeoff on the Creature of the Black Lagoon. But I would say, yeah, the ape and the skeleton are my two favorites. And then vampire fangs, I mean, I think every boy probably in his head was going, man, I'd love to be a vampire for Halloween. And then Larry came up with the simple way of making these folding, because of the tension. He used the right kind of plastic that made it so it would pop open with your mouth and closed with your mouth. So, he found the right material, and they were just so successful. They almost fit everyone too. That was the other great thing.
But let me add one thing. Let me add one thing to that, which kind of gives you an idea of the girth and breadth of Imagineering. When I sold Imagineering, we had 600 products.
Wow.
Started with Evil Teeth. So in various combinations, masks, everything else we were doing, we had 600 products.
600?
600 products.
You're going to need a bigger house, Ray.
Yeah.
Most of the collection that I have fits in one box. I mean, I have one box has the face kits. I need more face kits. I don't have enough of those. Then I have another box that has the carded, this kind of stuff. That all kind of fits in one box. Then I've got some of the bigger boxes. We didn't really talk about, I guess my favorite Imagineering piece is one that I don't own, probably never will. That's the Incredible Melting Man makeup. One of few licensed things, like around the same time you did the Close Encounters. I think that was around the same time you did Melting Man.
It was an early licensed item, and the person who can tell you about the best story on that is Gino.
Okay. What's your story, Gino?
Because I know both Barry and Larry, and we know Rick Baker really well, and of course Rick Baker was responsible for doing that makeup, early in his career. And when I started working for Rick, I worked with him on a couple of different movies. I worked with him on The Nutty Professor, the first one, and then also on Men in Black, the first Men in Black. But when I first started to know Rick and stuff, I told him, a bit of my background of, growing up in Phoenix and working for Imagineering. And then I remember when I said Imagineering, he kind of stopped and he says, wait, they did makeup kits and stuff, right? I said, yeah, Barry did the face and all that. And I said, I think they did the incredible melting man makeup kit. And I said, yeah, he did. And he says, He said, and anyways, later on, I ended up getting a photo to have him sign for Larry. And I think Larry, he still had this. I think he said, and Rick said something like, the next time you want to do a melting man face, please talk to me about the license.
Yeah. Well, that was a terrible shit. That was a terrible thing.
It was just like cotton balls and some liquid.
Yeah.
Caro syrup, wasn't it?
What?
Caro syrup or something like that, Larry?
I don't even remember what it was, but it was just total mess. The picture turned out a lot better than the makeup.
Well, I don't know. The picture's kind of cheesy. The movie's kind of cheesy too. But you just sort of repackaged the stuff that you already had. Like it had some of your bloody eyes, and it actually, I think it had the teeth. Some of these kits, you told kids to cut the teeth, to make them square. Like I also like the Monster Makeup Lab Mummy and Werewolf. It's like a circular.
Yeah.
I like those, and it's mostly cotton balls, and with like a tube of an adhesive stuff, and then the teeth to make it like a mummy. It says cut it so that it's squared off. But you took, once you had all your main products, you just started mixing and matching them and have different combinations, different colors, and you were able from those to make so many different kits and things from that basic set of the blood, the teeth, creepy skin, scar stuff, and a couple other things, the bloody eye. And from that, you just made this whole universe of all these different fanciful kits that just, made the kids' imaginations run wild with what they could do with this stuff.
I remember we had those little plastic eyes, Larry and Gino, where they look like bloodshot veins. Yeah. And they reminded me of the eyes from the old Weirdo model kits. If you remember Weirdo model kits, they always had these big bloodshot eyes on the creatures that were like in a dragster or something,
Yeah. Well, we talked about how all these makeup kits inspired a lot of young filmmakers and stuff. And then one of them that really got inspired was Guillermo del Toro.
Right.
Guillermo was out here when he was going to originally direct The Hobbit. So he was here with us for almost a year. Anyways, we were talking and I told him, I grew up in Phoenix. I worked for Imagineering. He said, "Oh, Imagineering." Says the oozing orb. I said, yeah. He said, "Oh, I love that stuff." I said, "Because when I was making my own movies back in Mexico, that's all I could afford." So he used to use Imagineering stuff all the time, and he sent me this picture. I'll send it to you, Ray. But it's a picture of him over his sister, and he's got the oozing orb on him, and she's covered in some blood and stuff, and so it's yeah.
You still owe me an autograph picture, Gino. You still owe me an autograph picture.
All right, I got to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys have pictures that pertain to anything we talk about, send it to me, and I can insert it as we're talking.
Ray, one thing just to mention that we never did talk about was in the last 2 or 3 years, we had an enormous amount of retail stores that were really small Halloween adventures. We have like 200 items. And we had a huge number of employees, and we did a large amount of business there. But the reason for putting those stores in was to get the retail market's consumers' feel on what was selling and what wasn't selling. So we would base our line expansion on what we learned off of those retail stores, what we were selling the most of and what all the comments were. And that was a very important part of Imagineering's growth right near the end.
Well, can you tell me 2 things? What product was the most surprising success? And what product did you think, oh, this is going to sell like hotcakes, and then it bombed?
Okay, I can tell you the second one is very easy. We made somebody had come up with a fire pot where they had light in the pot and the air blew the material up, and when the light hit the materials, it looked like it was flaming. And we said to ourselves, you know what, we're going to put out a handheld torch that does that same thing, and people can go around, and we're going to put it out for $10, and it's going to be try me in the store. We did all of this stuff. We put this out, and every customer we had went nuts over it, bought huge amounts of it. We're talking about Walmart, all of it. I know big stores and small stores, we sold on Halloween several 100,000 pieces, which is a lot for one item at Halloween. Nothing sold. When it got to the consumer, with all we did with it and with the price and everything, wanted nothing to do with it. It totally died. There were people who bought 4,000 pieces, and they had 4,000 pieces still in their warehouse at the end of Halloween. That was the biggest bomb.
Well,
the most successful one was the face.
But were you surprised by that, though?
Yeah, we were all shocked.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, we were just all totally shocked. And that really wasn't, that was like, I mixed them up. That was a take one product. Well, we were doing
the torch was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Larry, you should tell the story about you're at the toy show and how that took off. Wasn't it the vice president brought his boss in or something?
Oh, that was the face.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, we went into Walmart. Now, the Walmart, it's very hard to get to a buyer. What they have is a bunch of junior buyers who preview product. And it's up to them to sell if they think the product's good, to sell their box. And ultimately, it goes up to a senior buyer. So we spent, my sales manager, myself, and the rep in that area, spent until 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how we were going to get the number one big boss to see the face. And finally, we all just wore out and went to sleep. And the next day, we went to see Walmart with our junior buyer, who was the buyer as far as we were concerned. And we showed it, we did a demonstration, gave him a slide projection. And as we were doing it, he was leaning over the desk into the product. And when we finished, he said, I've got to get my boss in here right now. So we didn't need to do anything. The big boss came in and they bought very, very heavy. So did everybody else. The first year we were out with the face, nobody had seen anything anywhere near like it. And everybody jumped on it. Well, it was either going to be the biggest item we ever had or the biggest failure we ever had.
It was, as a kid, seeing that, like I said, it seemed revolutionary at the time. That was a game changer. It's night and day between like putty and blood and stuff, and now this foam appliance that you're attaching to your face and painting it and everything. That was a big deal. That really changed. I think that changed Halloween makeup products. Even to this day, I think things are different now because of having introduced that.
Well, it was so lightweight, too, when you stuck it on. It wasn't heavy like a rubber piece that you were sticking on your face. It was so lightweight, you almost didn't feel like you had anything on your face.
That's really true.
That was a big people tell me, like Kevin Yeager told me one time that he would get the pieces. No, it was Bill Corso. Bill Corso told me that he would get the pieces and actually sand the edges to get a really, really fine edge, to help blend it into the skin.
Oh, yeah. You know who the other makeup artist was who was blown away? It was Steve Johnson.
Okay, right.
Johnson, when I went and interviewed for him, he was the one who went, oh my God, you did the face? And he said, I remember being a kid and wanting to be a makeup artist and buying this. I had to beg my dad to buy it.
Everyone's got a story like that.
Yeah.
In dollars, the face was selling close to $4 million a year in products. That's a lot of product for a $10 item out in the makeup, out in the Halloween marketplace. It's just totally unbelievable.
So when we started, or before we started, you guys mentioned Monsterpalooza. I think you wanted to say something about Monsterpalooza. So
yeah, I think it was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. What was it?
Yeah, something like that.
Long.
It was longer than that.
I pitched to the guy who runs the show. I pitched to him an idea, and I said, we could do a whole thing on the history of Imagineering and the face kits and everything Imagineering did, and it might be a fun presentation for people to come. And we could have Larry and Gino, and we had Dan Clancy and myself and Steve, who's the artist?
Steve Lawrence.
Yeah. And we had a really great round table, and it was hosted by Danny Roebuck. And Danny's such a big fan of our product, and so I thought he would be perfect to host it. And it was really a great reunion. I know Larry came up to me afterwards, and he just said, I can finally put this to bed. I finally I feel closure. And that was so nice to hear from you, Larry. That was really a nice thing. And I just remember that it was really great.
Yeah, it was a terrific experience bringing everybody together after 30, 35 years. Imagineering was, I think, a 40-year-old company when I got rid of it. I remember the 2050, and we had at least another 15 years after that.
Well, and, before I forget, one thing we should mention is the year that you said you had a special licensee. And do you want to finish this story? You had a special licensee, and it was out in Arizona. You brought all the buyers out. You flew all your reps out. And who comes walking down the aisle?
Elvira.
Oh.
Yeah, we licensed Elvira. And she was a wonderful person to work with, by the way. Cassandra Peterson. Little tiny redhead. But you'd never know it with her makeup on.
Yeah. That was a big thing to get her, I think. I think that was also a neat line you put together.
It was. It didn't do as good as other things, but because it was mostly a girl's line. We didn't do a lot.
What products did you make for Elvira?
I'm sorry?
What kind of products did you make for the Elvira line?
Lipstick, fingernail polish. We did a makeup kit. We did a dress. Fingernails, right. There were all that type of items. So unless you're a girl, you wouldn't really be attracted to the line. The line wasn't really attractive to you. But we kept it for 3 or 4 years. And
did you make a plastic version of her dagger?
Yeah, I'm sure we did. Well, when you get a license, you dissect it and make everything you possibly can because it's not cheap to get a license.
Right.
Well, what was your first licensed product? Was it the Close Encounters thing?
I think that was our first licensed item. What is that?
Elvira.
Oh, yeah, there's Elvira.
Yeah, was the Melting Man the first licensed item, and then Close Encounters in that order?
One of those two.
Yeah,
I know those two. We were just learning on Close Encounters. That was the Melting Man didn't involve any Bolera.
right.
It was just applied. So the first thing that would come that had anything to do with the face would have been close-up frontage.
Right.
That's
but
the first place.
Licensing. Was Melting Man a licensed kit?
Was
Melting Man a licensed kit?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
We were massive in licensing at the very end of Imagineering. We had Batman. We had huge numbers of licenses.
Freddy Krueger.
Probably a third of our business was licensed product. We did Looney Tunes. I remember, Gina, you had a really fun run-in with the Looney Tunes people because for Tweety Bird, they weren't going to approve. There's still... Looney Tunes was not ready to approve Gino's sculpt of Tweety Bird.
Oh.
For some reason, they just did not like it. And no matter what Gino did, they keep coming back as no. So I finally said to Gino, just send the same one you did back again and tell him you made the change. And he did, and they said, fine.
Typical.
I think one of the comments was they wanted her Tweety's beak to be closed 1 millimeter.
Yeah, they're nuts. I tell you, licensing is just the nuts. We did a lot of monster stuff that we did Jurassic Park, we did Congo.
The great thing about all that licensing stuff, Larry, is because I was living in LA, working in LA, but I had contacts to everybody that pretty much worked on those films. So for Batman, I'd contact Jose Fernandez, who sculpted some of the first masks, and had him, so I would just pay them to sculpt the masks again. And so, we got approvals right away. It's like, wow, this looks just like the real thing. It's like, well, it's sculpted by the real guys.
Right.
Same thing as Jurassic Park and Freddy and all that other kind of stuff.
Was Freddy like a face kick constructed the same way? Like a foam thing?
That was what was that? It was it was like a face.
We did that. Right. Yeah. Pretty soon we didn't do it for us. We did it for a competitor of ours. We had the Freddy Krueger license.
Yeah.
And what about the turtles? I don't remember. I don't like that turtle you held up. I don't remember that. Well,
yeah, I don't know who had the license. It wasn't us, but they contracted us to build the face makeup kit. So the face had a lot of licensed products.
Another great license, Larry, was, remember the Terminator? You got that, and it was like a really quick turnaround. And
that was a miracle for a company to do. I went to see the Terminator in July. Came back and said got my whole team together and said we're going to do a Terminator makeup kit. We didn't even have the license yet. And it was July. And I remember our production manager said for next year. I said no, for this year. And we designed, got the license, manufactured, and tools and shipped. I think it was 50,000 pieces in a 90-day period. That's how good our company was. I say, my God, that's impossible. I still don't know how we did it.
Yeah. This was the first Terminator, the original Terminator film.
The original Terminator. We had designed an electric eye unit for it. We built the tooling for it. It was a hard shell that went on like the face.
It's a great material because it was a mirror finish to it. It was like chrome.
It's metallic.
Yeah, and then it came with a little container of the fake skin, so you could put that all around the edges.
Oh, wow.
Didn't the eye light up too?
Yeah, the eye lit up. That was just a company showing how good they can be if everybody's got their act together. I mean, it was...
Yeah, see, I never see that for sale, on the collector market. You would think that there would be more of those than anything else, but I don't remember the last time I saw one of those for sale.
You saw we ran a vacuform card, I think.
Yeah, that's what the hard part was, that it was a mirror vacuum flammable material.
Yeah.
We rented on the same machine they made the face on.
Larry, that reminds me, I don't know if you remember, you had asked me, you'd never asked me to do this before, and I loved the challenge. You said you wanted me to art direct and do a whole shoot out in LA at CBS at the photo studio there. And I used Tony Esparza, who's a really well-known photographer. And we just happened to have a makeup artist by the name of Mark Landon, who looked just like Danny DeVito from the Penguin makeup. And do you remember I did that Penguin makeup and we turned it in, and the company said, I think this company said to you, well, that's one of our stock photos. And you said, no, that's our makeup. You remember that?
I don't.
Oh, it was hilarious. Because he looked, with the nose on and everything, he looked just like the Penguin makeup.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Was it supposed to be a penguin kit?
Yeah, it's a Penguin makeup kit
No,
from Batman, the '89 Batman. Is it the '89? No, it's the one
It's
after.
Batman Returns.
Yeah,
it must have been because we had the license, so I'm sure we tried to do something.
yeah. You had so many irons in the fire. You just said, well, why don't you put this one together for us? And I remember doing it and sending you the photos. And you already had. I think I sculpted the nose and put the color palette together, and that was it. That's all that came with it. I think was the nose and the color palette and maybe two-way tape or something. I can't remember.
It was an easy one. Same thing with the Terminator. It's so easy to put on. And you were there.
Yeah.
Raymond, we could literally go on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we better wrap this up then. So let me go around. Any final words, any final thoughts, or anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered yet? Let's start with you, Gino.
No, it's just once again, it's like it's being there at Imagineering just helped me to get to where I am today, because I'd work during the day, happily go to work, and I'd work in my little workshop there, sculpting, molding, and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd go home, have dinner, and come back in the evenings, and I'd usually work from like 7 until midnight, almost every night, practicing and everything like that. There was one funny story I just remembered. Vic's Novelty, Larry. So Vic's Novelty was a company in Los Angeles, in North Hollywood, and they manufactured masks and vinyl products and things. And so at one time, Larry was thinking about opening up a latex plant in Phoenix, to produce the latex masks and that kind of stuff. So we needed to learn, how to set it up and the whole process and materials and all that kind of stuff. So I believe Larry found Vic's Novelty, and Vic Provenzano was the owner of the company. And Vic looked like who's Richard Simmons. He looked like, picture Richard Simmons, and this was Vic Provenzano. And anyways, they paid Vic, I think, like $15,000 to have me go there and basically work in their factory for months. And basically, they were going to teach me the whole process and how to set up a latex plant and everything. And so it was my first time really away from home. And so I went to live in LA, and of course I knew Barry and everything. And I remember going there for the first time to the factory, and Vic's giving me a tour. And at this time, his a couple of things that were really big and for him selling were these things called the wiggling hand. It was this hand that had this little mechanism in it that would just do this, and it was made out of vinyl, and people would put it like in the back of their cars and all that kind of stuff. And so that he was making $1 million off that stuff. And then he said, "Oh, I've got this other project," and he goes like this. He claps his hand, and this little motorized tit comes out rolling across the floor, and it's like, what the hell? And he goes, and then it takes off and it goes back. And he says, "Oh yeah, that's something else I'm working on." So anyways, we're going through the factory, and it just, the smell, I can still smell it today, hot melt vinyl, which is so toxic. And so one half of the company, the workshop, was vinyl, and the other half was all latex and everything. And so we're going around, and he had these big, like 55-gallon barrels, and they were all full of these vinyl snakes, because he made a lot of vinyl snakes and stuff for Disneyland. And so I'm going around just picking these.
I've got a lot of big stuff in my collection.
Okay. And so he's picking all these snakes up and stuff, and I picked up this one big black one, and looked at it, and it wasn't a snake; it was a giant dildo. And it's like, what the hell? I threw it down. He says, "Oh yeah, that's the other half of my company. It's called Better Than Leather." And so they made a lot of adult novelties, and they made these kind of things. And I had just kind of looked around the room, and I saw this big long table that had all these grinders on it, and all these Mexican women were taking the seams off of these dildos and things. It was just like, oh my God. So I'm stuck here for months, with all this. And then I remember calling Larry that night. I said, "You didn't tell me that Vic was making all this other stuff too." And it's like, yeah. So here I was. I think I was like 19 years old or something like that.
So collectors have to take note. If you collect Vic's Novelty made dildos under the name Better Than Leather. So you've got a new thing.
In case you're looking, yeah.
Oh gosh.
So Barry, how about you?
Well, I'll just make it short and sweet and just say that professionally and personally, I've never had such a great relationship and stories to tell, knowing Larry and knowing Gino and everyone with the company and the extended family and everyone. It's been a great ride. It really has just been wonderful, and I hold it near and dear to my heart because of the friendships. Larry came out. I'd been married twice. He came to my weddings and everything, and really was nice during all that time. And Gino also. I mean, I saw so much of me and Gino, like I've already said, and I'm so proud of Gino. I mean, I talk about giving back. Gino now is the top in his area there, and so well respected throughout the industry. And I feel like, well, I had a small hand in that, and it all pays off, and to me that's really what it's all about, because when you finally leave this place, it's the people you leave behind that carry the torch.
I just wish you could have helped me a bit more with Dick Smith.
Oh, well, there's that great Dick Smith story that you have about the sticky stuff on the bottom of the shoe when you were doing a screening of Death Becomes Her or something. You were doing some sort of thing. I remember that story, but that was a funny story. But
is that something we have time for, or is it?
Gino,
just it's a really quick one. It was just we were going to go see the dailies on Death Becomes Her. We went to this. I can't remember what studio it was, but we went in there.
George Lucas, wasn't it? It was Spielberg or Lucas?
No, the director was
But the facility, wasn't the facility Lucas's or Spielberg's?
I think it was Spielberg's place. Yeah,
I think Robert Zemeckis directed it.
Robert Zemeckis, yeah, that's right. And anyways, we went into the screening room, really small room, and I was with Dick, and we walk in there, and Dick's like, "Wow, take a look at this place, pretty fancy." And we're going around, and then we sit down, and they had like a table full of like snacks and everything, candy bars and drinks and all that kind of stuff. And Dick goes to me and said, "Hey, you think we'll have to pay for those candies over there?" I said, "I don't think so. I think they're all free, Dick. You can help yourself." I said, "Wow." And I didn't really. I'm a bit starstruck sitting next to Dick Smith, and then. And he said, "It's a pretty fancy place." And I said, and I just said something like, it's like, "Oh, well, at least our feet don't stick to the floor, like in most cinemas and stuff." And he snapped and looked at me and he says, Yeah, because if they did, we'd have to put some sodium glutamate on the bottom of our feet so it wouldn't stick. A typical Dick Smith thing because he's so scientific. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Larry, what would you like to say to close us out? Bring us home.
You got the three best guys together to tell you about Imagineering. We're all very close. I respect both of these people to the highest. I could probably wind this up with a pretty simple story, which ends up with my feeling about how important what Imagineering really meant to me. I was visiting Gino in New Zealand, and Gino said there's some people down at the plant that if you want to come down with me, I'd like to meet you. And I said, no, I'm really pretty low-key and not into doing interviews or any of this stuff, really. So Gino let it go. And about a week later, I was going down to Wētā to have lunch with him. And it set that up. And when we walked through the door, there were all these employees of Wētā waiting out in that waiting room at all different levels, and they all broke into applause. And that pretty much wraps it up for me. As to the knowledge of how important that all was to all of these people. It sunk in real hard, and I think about it often. That's pretty much it for me.
Well, that was a great story. I mean, I think there's people applauding right now watching this that are grateful for what all of you guys did and the contribution you made to their childhood. Whether or not they went into careers in makeup, you just gave a generation of kids and young adults a lot of fun and a way to exercise their imagination. And some of them, of course, did go on to careers in part because of what you guys did. Okay, well, this has been fantastic, and I'm glad I got the three of you together. I think this is a wonderful story, and even after almost 3 hours, I think the story is still not quite told. So, but I think someday something even bigger than this will need to be done for posterity to capture the Imagineering story in detail for all time. I think it's worthy of maybe a book or a longer documentary or something so that future generations will know this story and it's recorded for the future. But for now, we have this, and I appreciate all of you taking all of your evening really with me. Although, Gino, you're in the morning, right?
Afternoon. It's 3:00 on Sunday.
Gino's in New Zealand. I don't know if everyone watching understands that. Gino is in New Zealand doing this. So I appreciate you guys taking all this time to do this. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And I'm sure the audience is going to enjoy it as well. So thank you all very much. Now, this is my sign off. It's kind of corny. Oh, cool. I want a hat like that. But then I didn't work for Imagineering, so I can't wear it. But that's awesome. Just say that Imagineering hat's great. I love that. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you at home for watching. Until next time, the one who dies with the most toys is dead.